All right, I think that was my cue to get started. Uh, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Brian Ellis. I am the Associate Dean for Program Administration for the LeBow College of Business, and I'm also the Executive Director for the Goodwin College of Evening and Professional Studies. And let me be the first to welcome you all to TEDx LeBow. You know, every time this, I have to say, this is always an exciting event for me. You know, we've been doing it now for a couple of years, and you know, every quarter they get better and better. So no pressure to our presenters today, but I'm really excited to be part of this group and to be able to hear from our students on these very important topics. Uh, what I'd also like to do is just take a moment and recognize and thank our veterans today on Veterans Day. So if you're a veteran, thank you for your service, and just make sure that we recognize our military veterans on this very special day. I'd also like to welcome our prospective students. You know, we have a nice turnout for this TEDx LeBow event, and part of that is due to the fact that we've invited some students who are kicking the tires on Drexel and LeBow. You know, this is giving you a sense of kind of who we are as a college and as an institution, where we really like to elevate the voices of our students. This is just one of the many platforms where we allow you to do just that. So I want to thank our prospective students as well. And finally, for me, you know, there's been a lot happening. You know, 2020 has been a crazy year. You know, we've been able to navigate as a school, as a university, and as a nation. And I think one thing that's been critically important is recognizing diversity, equity, and inclusion. And here at LeBeau, you know, we do that, and we continue to try to be better in this space. Again, TEDx LeBeau is just one of the many things that we do in the DEI space, you know, to really elevate not only our students but any stakeholders associated with the university. You know, to kind of identify common ground so we can all listen, learn, and lead. You know, that's been my mantra for 2020: listen, learn, and lead. And I think this platform of TEDx LeBeau allows us to do just that. So again, I'd like to thank the presenters today. We have current students, we have alumni, we have other folks that are connected or affiliated with Drexel LeBeau. And I do want to thank you all for agreeing to participate in this event this evening, and looking forward to hearing from each of you. So with that, I'd like to bring back in my colleague, Caitlin Brady, and she'll take us through the rest of the program. So again, welcome, and thank you.
Thanks, Brian. And again, I echo Brian. Thank you guys all so much for joining us this evening. Just to set some ground rules to be respectful of our listeners, please try to stay on mute throughout the program as our presenters are presenting. I've had the privilege of hearing just tidbits of these speeches already, and as I've said, you guys are really in for a great night. So stay on mute if you're able. But I also encourage you to react along with our speakers. So you'll see a reaction button in the Zoom room. Feel free to give them a thumbs up or a cheer if there's anything particular that they say that really drives it home for you. Or in that comment section in the group chat, feel free to encourage one another, because it's really brave what these speakers are doing, kind of sharing their experience. And so we thank them for kind of taking the time to educate us as we listen, learn, and lead here tonight. So to kick it off, I have the privilege of introducing Nicole DeRoux. Nicole is a professional dancer represented by Clear Talent Group New York. Nicole is currently touring with the Hamilton Phillip Company. This is her national tour debut, as she debuts with the company in the ensemble as the Bullet. Nicole graduated from Drexel University in 2018 with a Bachelor of Science in Marketing and a minor in retail merchandising. Over the 4 years, she was a dance scholarship student training in ballet and modern. She was also featured as the dancer model in a national ad campaign for Drexel University's Ambition Can't Wait campaign. Nicole's TED Talk will explore the need for more diversity and inclusion at all levels within the theater industry, both on stage and off. Nicole, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Okay, let me just get this up. Okay, so today I'd like to talk to you all about racial diversity within the theater industry, and it will be on stage and off. I would like to start by everyone taking a second to close their eyes. Take a second and try and picture the cast of Hamilton. Yes, the hip hop Broadway smash hit, won 11 Tony Awards. I know you know the one. Who do you see when you're picturing this? What kind of people do you envision? Maybe you see a sea of Black, Brown, Latino, Caucasian, and Asian Americans, because that's what I see. Now, keep your eyes closed and take a second to picture the people who manage and produce the 5 companies of Hamilton. And try and think about the people that own the 41 theater houses on Broadway. If you're having trouble picturing them, I understand, and we'll make that a little bit clearer for you. You can open your eyes. Actors use our voices, faces, and bodies to bring in billions of dollars to New York City every single year. Casting calls beg for actors from diverse backgrounds with ethnically ambiguous looks, and they want to create the facade of inclusion underneath those bright lights. In our shows, we are belting out a cry for change that exists within an industry that isn't actively working towards that change that we're singing about. My name's Nicole DeRoux. I'm a professional dancer and actor with the Philip Company of Hamilton. I have been an ensemble member since February 2018. On my first couple days on the job in humid Tampa, Florida, I was as bright-eyed and frizzy-tailed as they come. You could hear, feel, and see the excitement with every step I took. As I was ushered around to meet the cast that I would be working with, I came to realize that I'd be surrounded by the most diverse and talented group of individuals I'd ever gotten to work with in my life. Throughout the following year, I continued to meet others who existed within the same theater orbit, including managers, producers, original creators, donors, and this group didn't seem to represent this, they didn't look to represent the same group that I had come to know on stage. I asked some cast members why they thought that the cast was 90% people of color, but then 10% white, while any other layer of the company was the exact opposite. To which they would normally respond, well, Lynn isn't white, but our company director isn't white. And to them I responded, but is that good enough for you? Everyone who was telling me what to do with my hair, how to move my Black body on stage, how to care for my body in this industry, how to represent myself and the brand on social media, and those who were controlling the payroll didn't look anything like me. As a cast member, I can see firsthand the pervasive lack of diversity that exists across the board within this industry. And this year, the resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement has really laid bare that lack of institutional equity that exists in all industries, but I'm going to speak specifically about the theater industry, because I think that you'd be surprised how much you can hide in the dark when you're paying for and fixated on the faces that are in the spotlight. This lack of representation, I believe, strips the industry of the ability to tell stories from people with diverse backgrounds. It strips children of the ability to dream of doing it for themselves. It perpetuates the damaging experience of tokenism, and it also upholds diversity quotas. Let's take a look at this chart by the ensemblist. This is a breakdown of ethnic representation in the ensemble of Broadway shows in the 2019-2020 season. So we can see that it is 3% Asian American, 4% Hispanic or Latinx, 7% unidentified, 12% mixed race, 25% African American, and 47% Caucasian. From looking at this, I think there has been a significant shift in recent years towards more racial diversity seen on stage, which is incredible. But when we take a look at this visibility report that was posted by the Asian American Performers Action Coalition for the year 2017-2018, we can take a look at New York City theater writers, which are 79.1% white and 20.8% people of color. Then when we look at New York City theater directors, it's 85.5% white, 14.4% people of color. So comparing the two, we can see that there is a significant difference between the people that we see on stage and the people that are behind the scenes doing more work. There's also a clear bias towards white writers and directors in this space. Hamilton is a show that completely takes pride in our representation on stage. We want to look like a melting pot, and we show what America looks like today, as opposed to what it looked like in 1776. In our show, we occupy the roles of historically white figures, but we tell the story of Alexander Hamilton and the founding of this country through hip hop music. Hamilton is a $1 billion franchise because of the actors of color. And this show has shaken the regular mold of casting, allowing other shows to imagine the possibility of using someone who's qualified and talented as opposed to somebody choosing someone for their skin tone. There are thousands of theater performers who have been left unemployed throughout this pandemic. And I can't say that I'm particularly thrilled to have been unemployed and living at home with my parents, but because of the work we've done collectively, it's made me really proud, and I see that it's going to change the industry going forward. We See You White American Theater is a group that was established this year to call attention to the organizations that surround and support the theater industry that do not uphold equitable standards. This group is supported by hundreds of actors, and some of whom you might notice, you might recognize. Some of these organizations that they've called attention to include the Broadway League, which is a national trade organization responsible for bringing Broadway shows to the public. They control labor contracts, they're involved in press and outreach for Broadway shows, and they also play a large role in recognizing the talent in the Tony Awards. Their leadership board is made up of 53 individuals, 3 of whom are people of color, making that less than 6% of their leadership as BIPOC. Actors Equity Association is the union that all Broadway performers are a member of in order to protect and protect our rights and safety in our line of work. 13% of their leadership is BIPOC. Telsey and Company is the national casting agency responsible for casting a majority of shows seen on Broadway, including Hamilton. They have since put out a statement that acknowledges their flawed hiring practices, their limited training pipelines, their biased audition processes, and their lack of institutional equity, and they've committed to doing better going forward. It's important to understand what happens to us when the gatekeepers of this industry don't look like us. We See You White American Theater has put out a list of hundreds of demands for these organizations, but I'll give you a short list of them. That includes a commitment to equitable presence in all levels of business, transparency regarding funding, donations, and political affiliations, a code of conduct to protect and nurture people of color in typically white spaces, and an elimination of oppressive hiring practices. We want our companies not to just look diverse, but be diverse. And we want them to tell this through their actions and not just their actors. In our show as a cast and in our lives, we use our voices and we fight for what we believe in. I mean, rise up when you're living on your knees, you rise up. Tell your brother that he's gotta rise up. Tell your sister that she's gotta rise up. When are these colonies gonna rise up? Some of you may know that's not even my line, but that's beside the point. It's about using your voice and making change in the world. In Adrienne Marie Brown's book, Emergent Strategy, she has said that the most exciting organizing happening today is coming from communities that are directly impacted by oppressions and injustices. And I see that through the bold people of color that I work with who are making the change going forward. As a company, we pushed for us to use our social media for both branding and for activism and advocacy. We encouraged our company to post about Black Lives Matter, about voting initiatives, about Heritage Months, political affiliations, and any issues that we believe impact our lives as people and actors of color. We want to use this 7.1 million follower platform to amplify diverse voices and set an example for other shows within this industry, because what we practice at the small scale sets the tone for the entire system. It's because of the brave, intelligent, talented, beautiful, socially aware, I could keep going on, socially aware people of color with nothing but time that are creating the change in the world. So because of this, because of what the cast and company has done, the response has been an improvement of communication pathways between actors and management, a commitment to conscious and diverse hiring at all levels within the industry. We've created a racial justice task force with representatives from each company, representatives from management and subcommittees to make sure that we're staying on task and supporting the issues that we believe are important. Lastly, Ava DuVernay, the filmmaker behind Selma and 13th, has collaborated with our fearless leader, Lin-Manuel Miranda, to create a database of BIPOC workers to encourage diverse hiring practices and to eliminate the excuse that they couldn't find a qualified person of color for the role. We demanded more of our company, and they heard us. With a simple unmute and the support of the other faces that I saw on my screen, we were able to create the Zoom where it happens. I'm a first generation Jamaican American with a Black Jamaican doctor of a mom who was my example that I could do anything that I put my mind to. She was a shining example of the performer that I could be when I grew up. And we all need examples like this in our lives for us to believe that we can do it too. Try to think about the first time that you saw somebody who looked like you glorified on screen or in the theater or in media. It might be a Disney princess or superheroes, but these early examples are pillars on which to establish your self-worth, your value, and maybe your dreams for the future. Some of you might have very early examples of these. Some, it might have been into your adulthood when you first saw them, or maybe you still have yet to see it. But each example that we can look up to paves the way for us to be able to do it for ourselves. We've had a very iconic first in the recent past, and in her first address to the nation as the Vice President-elect, she has said, "While I may be the first woman in this office, I will not be the last, because every little girl watching tonight sees that this is a country of possibility." She urged young people to dream with ambition, to lead with conviction, and to see yourselves in a way that others may not, simply because they haven't before. And to me, that is truly the essence of representation to me. And because the theater is so visible, that's why it's so important on stage and off. Over the past year, I have met the glistening eyes of young people who put themselves in our boots and our corsets and our military jackets, sometimes literally to come see the show. But when they come see us, it's about opportunity, it's about representation, it's about hope and vision. They want to be able to see that future for themselves. I urge you to keep listening, keep learning, and supporting BIPOC artists in any way that you can. And I don't just mean that on stage. I want a future of an anti-racist theater environment with people on stage, people backstage, people in the pit, people in creative teams, in leadership, in offices. In all of these elements, we want to create a space where people are seen and able to do these jobs. So I encourage you to follow some of these accounts to continue learning about racial equality in the theater industry. Thank you.
Nicole, absolutely awesome. I mean, I think we all took so much away from that. You said, no, you sang Rise Up, right? And we all have to do that with and for one another. So thanks so much for sharing your story and your experience. Moving on to our next speaker, we have Mary Odabashian. Mary Odabashian is inspired by the words of Henry David Thoreau to go confidently in the direction of your dreams. Live the life you've imagined. As a certified coach and original co-founder of the Business Women's Network at SAP in the US, she is dedicated to the growth of all colleagues and to promoting the values of diversity, equity, and inclusion across the company. As a global marketing VP for SAP Services and Support, she plays a key role in crafting the strategic plan to market the SAP Services and Support brand through the buyer's journey and customer lifecycle, driving marketing-specific actions to grow reputation, fuel profitable growth, and maximize business success for customers, SAP, and partners. Mary's talk tonight will explore how anyone can be a catalyst for change through personal perspective, passion, and action. Mary.
Thank you, Caitlin. Before I start, I would also like to just acknowledge our veterans who have served to protect our freedom, and especially the freedom that enables us to show up every day as our authentic selves, which is important for everyone. This is me in 1970, alongside my mom, my beautiful mom, who was a homemaker by day and a bookkeeper by night for our family business. And while she could help my dad run a business, in some states in 1970, she was not allowed to go by her maiden name. She could not serve on a jury. She could not have her own credit card in her own name. She couldn't establish a residence, and she couldn't incorporate a business. in her own name. It wasn't until 1972 when Title IX was passed, when my own personal rights against discrimination in federally funded programs, especially those in specifically known those sports in school, were protected. It was the first time that I was protected as a girl. And in 1973, my mom finally got the right to serve on that jury. And she's done so now many times in her life. And in 1974, she was finally given that right to get her own credit card. And I remember sitting at the dining room table with her as she signed the first application and being in awe of the financial freedom that she was about to gain. In 1981, when I was just in high school, I remember sitting in my living room watching Sandra Day O'Connor take her oath to become the first female Supreme Court justice, paving the way for Amy Coney Barrett to take her role on the Supreme Court justice just a few weeks ago. And it really blew my mind that when she took that role, hardly anyone blinked about the fact that she was female, which was pretty awesome. And I remember being a freshman at Drexel in 1984, sitting in the Crease Student Center and watching the campaign of Walter Mondale and Geraldine Ferraro. Geraldine being the very first female to run as vice president in one of the larger political parties. And while it was a failed attempt, I remember being also, again, in awe of the fact that the possibility that a woman could hold that potential was possible. And, we all know what happened last week with Kamala Harris becoming the vice president-elect, first female vice president-elect. That was a long 36-year journey. And you might be wondering, all right, Mary, like what headspace are you in, right? Are you angry that it took 36 years? Or are you in total awe and total excitement about the fact that you can now see that journey come to fruition? And I have to admit that for me, it's both. But personally, I choose to kind of follow that long game of change. I understand that things take time, and I understand that you have to kind of celebrate every win that comes along the way. And I guess I learned also that it doesn't happen on its own, right? We all have to take responsibility to optimistically and continuously press for progress and be a positive catalyst for change. And at Drexel, our tagline is "Ambition can't wait." And it most certainly can't. It's a great tagline. But ambition isn't enough to be that catalyst for change. It has to be coupled with hard work, with tenacity, with patience. My mom always said patience is a virtue, and that couldn't hold more true when you're playing for that long game of change. And I was really lucky to have a mentor early on in my career who kind of gave me a really good explanation of why it is that change in society can take so long. And I'd like to kind of share that with you for a moment. I invite you to take your hands and just fold them comfortably. I'm guessing that in doing that, you didn't even think about how you did it. You just brought your fingers together and clasped them into a comfortable position. Now I invite you to take your fingers and just shift them over by just one hand position. And I'm guessing it feels weird, just strange, for no reason at all. It just maybe doesn't feel right for most of you. And it won't feel right for a couple of minutes. And if you do it again tomorrow, it probably still won't feel right. Imagine if it feels weird for one person to shift one hand position by one finger over, what it must take to shift the mindset of a business or to change a socially accepted norm. In 1989, my big hairdo and I We were hired by SAP, which is a software company. And at that time, it was a pretty small company. It's now over 100,000 employees strong, but it was really small back then. And I was definitely in the gender minority. I think we were about 20 to 25% female at the time. And every customer that I served was probably twice my age. But it was really interesting. I was super lucky. I had fantastic female mentors. I had amazing male sponsors, and I truly felt like I belonged in my field, in my company, in my profession. Until one day I didn't. Through the late 90s and in the early 2000s, the percentage of women in computing went into a female free fall. And I couldn't believe that 18 years into my career at that stage, that I was still showing up as the only woman in the meeting, the only woman on a conference call, the only woman at the table. And at some stage, it started to become frustrating. It started to become, I felt alienated, and I started to feel like I didn't belong. But I was smart. I had a strong group of friends and a strong network. And one day, a few of us, we met for a coffee. And here you see depicted on the left, Donna Iannucci. By the way, she's a LeBow grad, 1997 MBA. And Lisa Spangler, they're both still at SAP. And Dorothy Anderman, she's at Google now. And we sat down one day and we talked about that frustration and that alienation and not feeling like we were belonging or respected. And we stewed in that for maybe a coffee, but then we switched it around and we used that as a passion point and turned it into a catalyst for change. Because we were passionate about it, and half of us are Drexel grads, so ambition couldn't wait. We very quickly came together and we constructed the Business Women's Network at SAP. And that was at SAP America. And the really important thing about that was, it was the Business Women's Network, and the most important word was not women's. The most important word for us was business. We wanted to create a way for women to connect, to create better business, a way for women to grow, to create better business, and a way for women to lead, to create better business. And in that journey, we partnered with the business and ultimately worked with them to create what became known as the North American Diversity Advisory Council. And in that council, we started constructing the business case for SAP of why diversity, equity, and inclusion would give us a competitive advantage and could translate into better business for us. And that for us as a software company turned into things like better innovation, higher employee engagement, greater customer satisfaction, and of course, what every business wants, higher revenues on the top line and better margins and profitability on the bottom line. And as SAP went through that journey of understanding the value of diversity, equity, and inclusion to the company, they decided that they didn't want to keep it a secret. They wanted to say it out loud in the public, and they dared to actually put out into the public a statement that said, by 2017, they had the ambition to grow their women in leadership positions to 25%. And the super cool thing is, we did it and we exceeded it. And I was so proud to be part of that journey. I was even more proud that SAP said, you know what? We'll pat ourselves on the back for a moment, but the journey's not finished. And they doubled down and they said, you know what? We're going to aim for the aspiration of parity of women in leadership at SAP by 2030. And so now we have another long game ahead of us where we have to cheer every win along in order to help the company to achieve that goal. I'm personally really proud of the contribution that I made to be a catalyst of change within the company. At some stage, I handed over my leadership role to the next generation so that they could have an opportunity to lead, and I serve in other ways at SAP. But I'm proud of the fact that that groundwork then led to the foundation for other employee networks at SAP. So for example, today, we now have the Black Employee Network, we have Latinos at SAP, we have Pan-Asians in America, Pride at SAP, Autism Inclusion Network, and I think in the coming days, they're gonna institute a interfaith network. And for me, again, as I look at that long game, I really hope that at someday we get to a point where we don't even need employee network groups, that we come to a place where the diversity amongst all of us is what unites us. So that's my story. My question is, what about you? What is it that you're passionate about? What perspective is it that you bring to the table in terms of what came before you and what now lies ahead of you? And what action can you take to be a catalyst for change? And I heard earlier today, there's small acts when multiplied by billions of people can create a revolutionary change. So it only takes small acts, right? So what small acts can you take? If you're a student, you might be working on a capstone project, which is a group project, right? And are you doing your part to make sure that everybody in that group project has a sense of belonging and a sense of importance? If you're a co-op or an early talent, you gotta bring that Gen Z mentality and perspective into your new workplace, whether it's in a project that you're working on or a meeting that you're attending. It's important for businesses to hear your perspective and point of view. If you're a job seeker, make sure that when you're interviewing your prospective employers, try to understand what their corporate culture is like and make sure that that culture is in alignment with your own personal value system. If you're an alumni out there, I know that you are serving as coaches, as mentors, as sponsors for the up and coming leadership of the future. And if you're faculty, I'm hopeful that you are taking the business value that diversity, equity, and inclusion can bring to business and baking it into the curriculum so that students who are graduating know how to take that into their business leadership skills of the future. Ambition can't wait. So I invite you to turn your perspective and your personal passion into the actions that are important to you and to be the catalyst for change that you want to see, whether it's in your family, in a business, or in society at large. Thank you.
Mary, that was absolutely fantastic. Your focus on the long game, as you call it, really does go to show that that's where change happens. Focus on the now and focus on that long game. So thanks so much for sharing your story there with us.
My pleasure.
Our next speaker we're going to bring up is Brandon Cisneros. So Brandon is a junior at the LeBow College of Business studying marketing. And Brandon's talk is entitled Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, Being Latinx in the U.S. Brandon?
Thank you, Caitlin. So let's talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Let me give you some background about myself. I'm a first-generation Latino with Ecuadorian and Chilean descent. I come from a small town in central New Jersey called Perth Amboy, and being in a small community that's predominantly Hispanic/Latinx, I grew up surrounded by poverty and immigrants who have the strongest work ethic I have ever seen. People come to this country in search of a better life, including my mother and my grandmother, who both immigrated from Ecuador. My mom didn't speak or understand English when she first came, so being in school was a little difficult. While her mother worked all day and went to community college at night, my mom usually had to cook and clean for the both of them, while still handling her own homework and her own responsibilities. Being Latinx in America is not necessarily looked upon with a smile. Now, what is Latinx? And why has this term become more popular? Latinx is a term that is non-gendered and non-binary to create more inclusivity in a language that has historically been more masculine dominant. And I personally identify as Latino and unfortunately always felt different because of my light skin color and being unacquainted with the language. I've been called whitewashed and privileged. However, it helped me embrace the importance of my culture and the language. Now, yes, I may seem better off than some of my peers, but this doesn't mean that we don't share similar challenges. Throughout high school, I wanted to become more involved with administration and be a voice for the students. I served as president of student council for 2 years and was student representative on the Board of Education. Within those roles, I advocated on certain issues that students wanted addressed by the administration. And one of my proudest achievements was instituting an academy model that revolutionized our way of learning. These academies focused on specific fields of studies to help students discover what they were interested in so they could gain more practical skills before graduation. Now, I moved to Philadelphia to pursue my studies in marketing at Drexel University about 3 years ago. Here, I noticed a vast difference between my school and Perth Amboy. The student population was mostly Asian or white, with an extremely small Latinx demographic. And at my time at Drexel so far, I joined cultural groups such as Latinos for United Campus to socialize with other Latinx students. I became involved with professional organizations such as Prospanica and the Association of Latino Professionals for America, and the Greater Philadelphia Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. As a member of those organizations, I networked with countless individuals who helped me advance my career. And I started with Prospanica Philadelphia, their professional chapter, as a volunteer on their marketing committee and became their marketing officer in 2019. After serving for about 2 years on the professional chapter, I decided to start my own university chapter. And Prospanica Drexel became the first and only university chapter in the Northeastern region, and we quickly grew. Many young Latinos face prejudice across the United States due to the lack of diversity and inclusion in various areas. This may include in the workplace, in academic institutions, and in their own communities. As with every generation, a young person's trajectory is eventually tied not only to their prosperity, but to the country's economic success. When looking at the nation's Latino youth, there are challenges and there are opportunities. A record number of Latinos are pursuing higher education. However, college costs are still the biggest deterrent for this minority group. Despite financial odds, Latinos are proven to be ambitious, optimistic, and resilient. Did you know that there are about 60 million Latinos in the United States? This makes up about 18% of our total population. Now, we all know that 2020 has been a year, but it is one that has shown that we are living in a moment that has become a movement. Let me just step back and repeat this one more time. One that has shown that we are living in a moment that has become a movement. Businesses need to reflect their customers. They need to reflect their community, and they need to reflect their values. Systemic racism and racial injustice have always been present in the United States. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is a journey, and it has taken corporate America's attention. Now I'm going to explain to you why it should be every company's #1 priority. Employers must actively institute training, hiring, develop resource groups, and create new policies to combat the history of injustice and showcase under-marginalized groups within their workplace. However, it all begins with our youth. Over 80% of working Hispanic adults provide essential services for the US economy. Companies restrict hiring Latinx workers due to their immigration status, the ability to speak English, the lack of education, the lack of skills, and more. However, many of these individuals have the necessary skills to complete hard labor work and demonstrate dedication, leadership, and ambition. Latinos make up $2.3 trillion of the GDP. Hispanic-owned businesses are contributing more than $700 billion in sales to the economy annually. If the Latinos population in the United States was its own country, it would be the 8th largest in the world. Within corporate America, Latinos act fragmented and often are misrepresented. 76% of Latinos pretend they are something they are not in the workplace. I heard a story of a female from a big tech company who shared that she had to use a fake name in the workplace because her real name was too hard to pronounce. Now, how can corporate America solve this growing issue? They should follow a 3L framework, which seems to be a pretty common theme today. Listen with empathy. They need to be able to learn and provide growth. and they need to be able to lead with courage. There needs to be more diverse representation within the C-suite. 85% of high-paying boardroom positions at large and mid-sized companies are currently occupied by white men. And research shows that boardroom diversity can positively impact both profitability and job satisfaction within companies, in particular by bridging the divide between company executives and lower-level employees. Now, when we lift each other up and provide opportunities to all, we can drive equality and equity in communities all over the world. Organizations such as the Hispanic Star Campaign have provided relief, resources, and a powerful network to Latinos who suffered from COVID-19. First launched in March, the call for hub leaders caught my attention. Just a few weeks later, I became the youngest hub leader in the country and represent one of the country's major cities, Philadelphia. There are about 200,000 Philadelphians who identify as Latinx, which represents 14% of our total city population. With such a large responsibility, I was ready to take the challenge to make an impact. To date, the campaign has impacted tens of thousands of Latinx families with food, household products, PPE, and more. Now let me leave you with this quote featured in the most recently released book, Hispanic Stars Rising, The New Face of Power. Now this quote comes from Richard Montañez, the former PepsiCo executive and the official inventor of the Flaming Hot Cheetos. So he said, "Don't do it for the paycheck, do it for your last name." And I've really lived up to this quote. Through my work as a student leader, advocate, and professional, I'm humbled to be where I am today. Through ambition and hard work, I'm grateful for the support from my family, friends, and colleagues. And finally, I am proud to be an advocate for the Latinx community, and I'm excited to continue through the journey of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Thank you for listening.
Brandon, I mean, congrats on all that you have already accomplished there. And I mean, I think we all can agree we got the chills with that line, 2020 is a moment that is now a movement, and you're a part of it. So thanks so much for sharing your story with us. Our final speaker of the night is Muntaha Haq. Muntaha is a freshman, a first-year student at the LeBow College of Business studying general business. Muntaha's talk is entitled, "Hello, My Name Is." Muntaha?
Hi, everyone. So my name is Muntaha Haq. My name is derived from the Arabic lotri, Sidratul Muntaha, which lies on the pathway of heaven. The beauty of Sidratul Muntaha is said to be indescribable, with its leaves as large as elephant ears and fruits like water jugs and rivers flowing from its mighty trunk. My name also translates to the end, but that's pretty morbid if you ask me. Like any other person with a unique name, growing up wasn't easy. Kids made fun of me, substitute teachers were scared of me, and I could never find my name on a t-shirt at the mall kiosk. But honestly, it never fazed me. I always loved my name, especially from how my mom described it when I was younger. All that changed on my first day of middle school. I remember meeting a girl, her name was Lizzie, and she immediately seemed like the coolest person ever. So I tell her my name, Muntaha. Lizzie stops. She wasn't mean about it or anything, but she asks if I have a nickname. I say I don't. And then she makes this face like she's about to give me the most life-changing advice. "You should get one," she says. For the first time in my life, I wanted nothing more than to be a Sally, a Grace, anything but Muntaha Haq. What I didn't realize is that my father, a man I had always idolized, had the same experiences working at the car dealership. I remember him talking to my mom when he thought my sister and I were asleep. Another customer didn't want to work with him because of his name. He was too Muslim to work with. My father's name, Abu, told customers he wasn't all-American, that his culture was still very much a part of him. So, like many immigrants, my father adopted a new name, a name that erased his identity as a Bangladeshi, Sam. Let me tell you a story. You might know this one. A 21-year-old and his friend start a tech company in the back of a garage, a company that now has an estimated net worth of $2 trillion. That once 21-year-old is responsible for the phones, tablets, and laptops we all use today. Abdul Latif Jandali. Maybe you're thinking of Steve Jobs? Well, you're not wrong. Steve Jobs was not always known as Steve Jobs. He was born to the name Abdul Latif Jandali. Although his biological father was Syrian, his adoptive parents, Paul and Claire Jobs, changed his name. Today, we recognize the revolutionary tech mogul not as Abdul, but as Steve. Would anything have been different had Abdul been the one who found Apple, or are Abdul and Steve one and the same? Just how does name discrimination impact you, your friends, and your family? There are 4 applicants: Lakeisha, Jamal, Emily, and Greg. All 4 of them have the exact same resume. Theoretically, each of them have an equal chance of getting the job, right? In a study conducted by Bertrand and Mulanathan, in comparison to names such as Lakeisha and Jamal, which are associated with Black heritage, names such as Emily and Greg are 50% more likely to receive callbacks for interviews. 50%. We are raised to believe that if we work hard, study in school, we'll be successful. Our names have just become another reason, another justification for employers not to hire us. All right, but where did this all begin? Name discrimination isn't just a product of the 21st century. It begins with the very history of immigration, the birth of the American dream. In the 1850s, Chinese families began immigrating to the United States during the gold rush after hearing about the many opportunities on the West Coast. Many chose to abandon their traditional names in hopes of assimilating. Adopting Western names allowed Chinese immigrants to be perceived as more American, which helped secure jobs and education. This practice has become increasingly common not only in the Asian community, but all minorities. Today, many immigrants and people of color create a name not for themselves, but for the convenience of others. So that when we go on dates, we don't have to make an awkward joke about how long our names are. So when we go to coffee shops, the barista doesn't give us a side eye. So when we introduce ourselves, we don't feel that our real names have become a burden. Although many companies have begun to create a more inclusive brand image, it comes down to performative activism. Releasing a rainbow-colored t-shirt during Pride Month or a press statement during Black History Month isn't enough, not when the people making those decisions look the same way as they did 10 years ago. Diversity is often perceived as a strategy, an opportunity to expand. Diversity in business should be about authenticity, but today it's about adaptability and assimilation. Hiring agents don't look for Lakeisha. They look for someone with Lakeisha's appearance named Emily. But we can't blame the big man by himself. It comes down to people like you and me. Every person has some sort of internalized bias, but by recognizing our bias, we can start a conversation. What race do we associate with certain careers? Do we perceive some races as more or less capable than others? What influences have shaped our idea of race? There are all these questions we're terrified of asking because we're afraid to confront the truth. But change isn't intended to be comfortable. It means self-reflection. It means holding ourselves accountable. Not easy, but definitely necessary. When we finally begin to be honest with ourselves, we begin to grow. Names are an integral part of any immigrant or person of color's identity. Name discrimination is the beginning of cultural erasure. It is not only prevalent in the hiring process, but in day-to-day life. Name discrimination exists when people refuse to learn how to pronounce Jamal and shorten the name to James. Name discrimination exists when people avoid saying your name at all, too afraid to offend. Name discrimination exists when your name is treated with any less respect than Emily or Greg. Our identities begin with our names. It's the first impression of who we are as people. It's what we represent. It's who we will become. When, as a society, we choose to embrace these identities, even when they're difficult to pronounce, our world becomes a better place to live in. Because our names carry perspective, culture, stories, and with our names, we define ourselves. So the next time someone introduces themselves to you, remember to pay attention. Thank you.
Muntaha, that was so incredibly impactful, and truly, I feel like we could just hear your heart telling the story. And you have a gorgeous name, and you should never nickname it. And I think it resonated with so many. And I mean, for all of our speakers, you guys, if you haven't already, look at the comments here, because I mean, what you've done here tonight has truly made an impact. So we cannot thank you enough for kind of sharing your hearts with us this evening. To close it out, I want to turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Brian Ellis, for the official closing remarks.
Wow, you guys did not disappoint at all. I really want to thank, Nicole, Brandon, Mary, and Muntaha. I mean, you guys were amazing. And I was sitting here taking notes, and, Nicole talked about staying on task. It's very important that we all do that, stay on task. Mary talked about being that catalyst for change, which is critical for all of us. Brandon, I mean, I love this. The moment has become a movement. And then Muntaha, you talked about the authenticity. The authenticity of your name is so important. Again, I can't thank you guys enough for being part of this. And we continue to do this type of work in LeBow all the time. In fact, I'm going to do a shameless plug here. On Friday at 10 o'clock, we're actually having our annual diversity case competition. So simply when we have students, we give them a case on DEI, and they come up with some solutions as if they were consultants. So if you have some time, between 10 and noon on Friday morning to kind of jump in on a Zoom call to be part of that, to hear the students and their solutions as we enter the space. Because like Brandon said, this moment has become a movement, and that's what we're really trying to do here within the college. So again, I want to thank you guys. I want to thank all the folks who came by and viewed this amazing session. And I look forward to seeing you at the next event. So thanks and have a good evening.